Welcome back. Texas Platinum, the last of the real water cooler talk shows on YouTube. Texas gets it done. You know, a really weird feeling game against Vanderbilt. It was just like pure domination and so exciting, and then kind of a bad feeling left in your mouth at the end of it because the defensive collapsed the last 5 minutes of the game. But Texas gets a big top 10 win in Austin, and very much squarely in the CFP picture now with 3 games left. And it's all out in front of us. Bye week comes at a perfect time, and Texas controls its own destiny. But before we get into it, please like and subscribe. Give us some love in the comments, and we appreciate y'all tuning in every week. Kyle, my man, how you doing? What was your thoughts on the game Saturday and Texas's overall positioning heading into November?
Well, I'm going to start with what many of the analysts said, like Joel Klatt. He said, just a couple weeks ago, you expected Sarkisian. You want him to turn over power of the play calling. You maybe wanted to even try Caldwell instead of Arch. And the offense just had a total coming out game. This is the type of offense we've been expecting to see since, week 1 with Ohio State. And they moved pretty effectively. We had first play of the game, was a swing pass to Wingo, and he goes the distance for a touchdown. A mix of bad tackling by Vanderbilt, but just at the same time, we finally saw Wingo's speed, his agility, his elusiveness in the open field. But a big thing that gets me really heated about this game is that Arch spread out the love. He had 10 different receivers, spreading it out. The run game was effective. Wisner and Baxter, kind of looked like that 10 that we've been waiting for a long time. And the offensive line did a pretty decent job outside of a couple penalties. But I'm not going to lie now, after this recent week of SEC football, there is some question into the validity of some of these flags. The officiating has now been called into question. The whole pylon situation where the guy sticks it out and clearly they're saying the laces broke the plane. There's a lot going on right now with SEC officiating. So, I'm going to kind of chalk that one up to a, give and take situation. But all around, the offense looked great. The defense, though, I said last week, we talked about Anthony Hill Jr. at SEC Media Day talking about how he has this game circled. And I said it's because they didn't finish the game. Well, we can say we've given Vanderbilt the past 2 years 6 great quarters of football, and we've really given them 2 quarters of not so good football, and we haven't finished the game twice. Defensively, I'm going to chalk this one up to Taff. Some of those blatant blown coverages, that's where you miss having that field general and Taff on deck. But at the same time, this is just the total, I would say, the foot off the gas, the Tom Hermaning of, totally taking your foot off the accelerator, pulling the e-brake, just trying to run out the clock really showed that Texas can't do that. And it really kind of tainted the win, but it's, again, a win nonetheless. So there's still some things to open up and work on with defense going this one just to make sure they finish games, especially now that Georgia and A&M are on the horizon. We can't play only 3 quarters of football and expect to win. But it's at the same time, you're hoping that now with some of the new adjustments on the offensive line, the swagger that the offense and that Arch and his receivers have kind of caught on will keep rolling on. And at the same time, Wisner and Baxter finally find their groove as well in this situation and keep building on that performance that they did against Vanderbilt. But otherwise, hats off to the boys. They did a great game. The play calling was great. The execution was there, just wasn't there in the fourth, but all around a great win. And it definitely put us in a position to where we still have control of a little bit of our journey into the CFP. Maybe not for an SEC title game, but definitely a chance to go win the big one at the end of the day, which is, I think, what matters more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start off with the positives as well, and I think that's exactly right. I think Texas showed on Saturday that we have it in us to be a real contender type team that can beat anyone on any given Saturday, any top 10 team, because Texas was just kind of working Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt, say what you want about Vanderbilt, but they're a legitimate top 15-ish program right now, or at least team this year. So that's a great sign that Texas is progressing this season, improving. Specifically the O-line, I want to give a shout out. I love that shuffle of Connor Robertson at center. He just looks like a vet out there, and he was moving. He's bigger than I thought he was. He looked big out there, and he was getting blocks downfield and getting chippy, which you love to see. And it allows Cole Hudson and DJ Campbell to play their natural positions. And they held up, man, even on that all out blitz where the 8 guys were sent. Wisner picks up one of the guys, and there's a pocket there for Arch to step up into, and he had about 3 seconds to get that ball off, and we draw the PI. So even when we blocked that, I was like, okay, our O line is feeling themselves today. Brandon Baker had another good game. He graded out really well. Gooseby graded out well, and no sacks, which is huge because Arch, was coming off the injury. He really didn't get. I mean, he got a couple hits as he was throwing the ball, but nothing significant. So that's huge. Also, I want to talk about, you already mentioned the receivers, uh, but the blocking that they were doing on the perimeter was amazing. Emmett Mosley in particular looked really good all game long, blocking downfield, turning potential -2 yard receptions into 6, 7 yard receptions with holding their blocks. So that's a great development. And then Mosley as well in the pass game, man. That guy's dynamic. He was getting mugged on that deep bomb that Arch threw a dime on, no PI. And, he didn't catch it technically, but man, the fact that he almost caught it and controlled the ball through that is just like, that guy's got sticky, strong hands. And he's a guy you can rely on, I feel like, for clutch throws, like I've been talking about, like A.D. Mitchell, Matt Golden. He's got that same DNA from what I can tell. Hopefully Wingo gets healthy. I think it was just like a dislocated thumb, so he should be okay. But receivers, they got to have those thumbs working real well to be catch the balls. But overall, man, the offense, no complaints. Not a single complaint. Sark called a great game, and give him some credit because we're always on here complaining about schematics and certain play calls here and there. But man, he listened to us. I mean, he went a lot more 11 personnel, just got the ball out quick, and really extended the run game through the lateral passes and a lot of outside zone. Let the Wisner get out in space. He got Niblet involved on those on that rollout throwback flea flicker thing, which was awesome. I was surprised he didn't score. Gooseby kind of missed a block there. He should have walked into the end zone, but still, man, Sark was probably the best offensive play calling I've seen from Sark in a couple of years. I want to say all around, it was just a complete game from Sark. Defense was elite in the front seven all game long. Bobby had only been sacked I think 7 times all season. We sacked him 6 times, which is Ethan Burke, Colin Simmons, Brad Spence. And the thing I like about our front seven, just looking towards next year, you lose Anthony Hill and Ethan Burke, but you get Spence back, you get Colin Simmons back, you get T'Anthony Smith back, you get Leonga Lafau back, you get Murad Watson, all the D tackles you get back. Our front seven's going to be nasty as well next year, and that really excites me. Secondary is a problem, man. I know we were completely banged up, especially once McDonald went out with a concussion, because then you're down your 2 veteran safeties, and then you got Phil Simeon there and whoever else it was. It was a combination of Jonah Williams and Derek Williams, who still doesn't look like he did prior to injury. And then Manny Muhammad's getting pulled out of the game a lot because he's banged up himself. So basically, all you have out there as a veteran is Gilbo, who was our weakest link anyways. So there needs to be some shuffling there. We need to get healthy there. I thought Cade Phillips played well as a freshman. Phil Sami, he got baptized out there, and he cost us some points. But, that's his first real action, so I'm not going to get mad at him for that, baptized by fire. But I think there's some things we can do in that secondary. I like the idea of moving Gilbo back to star, get him out of that corner role. I want Manny at one corner, and either Cade Phillips or Grace Middleton at the other corner. And you got to get McDonald and Taff on that back end again, and really just focus on coaching them up this week and not letting them just have those coverage busts. Man, it was really just 2 drives. You go back and watch the game; it was 2 drives. So where the defense secondary got, so it felt way worse in the moment. But they had the one drive where it was a 1-play coverage bust. Whatever, that rarely happens under Sark and PK. So it is what it is. And then there was that one really bad drive, 4th and 18, they convert. And we looked really bad for two series. But overall, the defense played really good. And, that's a good offense from Vandy. You got to give them some credit. They're going to score. So overall, man, it was a great win. And Arch is growing up. Arch is looking like a Manning out there. He's getting better week to week. And I'm just very excited. This Georgia game, the way Kyle and I were talking about this game over the past couple of weeks, we're kind of chalk it up as a loss, But Georgia's not invincible, as we know. They're prone to playing in close games. Being down at halftime, coming back, and we're kind of getting better. So I think we're gonna have a real chance to win that game in Athens. We're gonna have to bring our A game, of course, but I feel like we're gonna definitely be in that game, and we just got to figure out how to play 4 quarters. But the bye week comes at a good time, and we just got to get healthy and sit back and watch the chaos ensue.
Hey, you couldn't say it any better though. With this bye week, the major thing we need to do is get healthy. We had too many guys. We had a guy go down with a concussion. We can all say what we want about Wingo and his dislocated thumb, how that's not, but it's a dislocated thumb nonetheless as a receiver. And we got a nice little visual of it live streamed on the game itself. They zoomed in on it. And you're like, oh, that looks a little nasty. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, we get Taft. Hopefully, we can get Taft back. Hopefully, we can get a couple more guys who have just been banged up, had some tread on their tires. We get them back, and this is a good time to rehab. Anyways, we've had this 5-game travel schedule. There's a lot of things that go on with travel. Taylor Wan and Will Compton talked about this on Bustle with the Boys in their earlier episodes when they were still in the NFL. You have your own adversities with the traveling via the plane, and which is what they're doing. They're flying to Florida, they're flying to Mississippi State, they're flying to Kentucky, and then they just they finally stayed here in Austin for Vanderbilt. You drove maybe to Dallas, but still, flying causes your soft tissue to become inflamed, to swell up. It really starts, the pressurization messes with your blood flow, so you're actually almost putting a mile on your body for every hour that you're in the air, allegedly, is what they're saying as NFL trainers and stuff like that. So this was not just the wear and tear on the field, but the wear and tear on the actual travel itself. You're not sleeping in your bed. You probably don't have the ability to do as immediate rehab or recuperation, traveling back immediately after the game when you're on a plane and stuff like that, or a bus. So you don't get to just relax in your facility and everything like that. So it definitely, and especially changing time zones as well, probably is really tough for them. And so this was a good chance for them just to decompress. But at the same time, this week is really going to be crucial for them to get back on schedule, to get their bodies right. Maybe start, getting back on their diets instead of, this crazy travel itinerary, get off their feet, hit that training room, hit the hot tubs, the cold tubs, our 5-star resort type of rehab center, and use all these tools that we have, the sauna and stuff like that, and get their bodies right. We need to make sure that we're coming up fresh, because Georgia's going to be a physical game. And especially going into their house, we need all hands on deck, especially getting Taft back in the secondary, because we've now seen Gunnar Stockton become a dual threat with both his legs and his arm. So we definitely need to make sure our secondaries are on point for that. But at the same time, hitting him like we did in the SEC championship game is going to be crucial. So we need to get our big guys back to feeling 100%, as well as our offense, getting that elasticity and getting back to full speed, because we can probably outpace these Georgia Bulldogs. We probably can outrun them too, but we have to make sure that we can take their hits when they catch up to us. But yeah, man, I liked how Steve got Niblett involved. Finally, we saw him attack more to the field like we wanted to, but he finally cooled down, not having any effect on special teams. And matter of fact, special teams almost cost us the game by not cleanly recovering that onside kick. So, that's what I really love about this Texas team, is even though we've kind of jumped on these past 2 games of Mississippi State and Kentucky, that special teams and defense are going to win. You kind of can say that they didn't play their cleanest game here in Vanderbilt, but the offense played out of their mind to where they made up for it. So now you're finally seeing that everyone is playing that complementary football. So all around, I think you can say, we've now shown the absolute highs of every point and every squad on our team. So we've also seen the absolute lows and what we need to work on with every respective unit of the team. So I think this is I think now we finally know and have the sauce and the secret recipe for success. The question is, though, can we continue to have that mental maturity to execute? Because again, we're going back on the road to Georgia before we have a 2-game homestand back at DKR. So it's going to be tough. I think anytime you're going to have to do that travel to back home to travel again type of schedule, I think it's tough. Thank goodness we have this bye week to kind of break up that monotony, but it's definitely going to be, I think this game is not going to come down to physical or talent. I think it's going to come down to who is mentally going to execute their game plan better. And I think Texas has the edge in that because they've stayed cool in these high pressure circumstances. Georgia has too, but you know what? They haven't had to come back yet. And they haven't had to come back from really far down. So I feel like if we can at least jump on them, get up 21 points like we did in the SEC championship game, I'm more confident in this year's defense, especially getting more pressure. Because, like you said, Ethan Burke is having a heck of a year. He's definitely having a senior stardom season. I believe that we will actually be able to get more pressure on a Gunner Stockton than we did in the SEC game. So this is going to be a very tough test for us. But the name right now of the game this week is get healthy and get rested up.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I like what you said. The team is callous. They really are. They've been through a lot. That 42-day road trip, that'll change you. That'll build you up or tear you down as a culture, as a locker room, I feel like as a college kid. So I think that we've responded well. It started off bad with the loss in the swamp, but ever since then, Texas is finding ways to win against adversity, fighting back. I will challenge you on Georgia's had a couple of games where they came back. I think Ole Miss, they were down by a couple scores, and I mean they were losing some of that game against Florida, but I do think that we're just as calloused as them, just as war tested as them. I do think it lines up good how they're playing this weekend. We have a bye week. They're playing in Starkville. As we know, he'll say it might not be the best team in the SEC, but they can keep things interesting. They got some talent, some really good receivers, and a good quarterback. So that's a game that I got my eye on. I think it's the noon, 11 a.m. game Saturday. So it's good that Georgia's going to have to be dealing with that while we're resting up, game planning for Georgia. That's huge because Kirby's kind of had Sark's number in terms of game planning and critical moments. I just think of that fake punt he had in the SEC championship to really recapture momentum and save that game for them because that game felt like we were the better team. The first one in Austin, they showed up and kicked our butts, man. He had all the bulletin board material because we were number one. We were the Joneses being crowned as the king, and it was little old Georgia, so that made sense. But I feel like the second game, Texas really was in that and should have won it. Bert Auburn hits a field goal or two. We win that game. We're SEC champions. So I think Sark kind of rallied in terms of game planning and prep and, the psychological edge. But this is kind of the premier rivalry in the SEC in our eyes, at least, over the next couple of years, Texas, Georgia. And I would hate to lose three in a row to them. We got to get this one back. And we got to win it to keep our playoff hopes alive. 9-3, that's a debate. Could Texas get in at 9-3 potentially? It's going to be tough. I mean, there's a world where that happens, but let's just win it and not have to worry about it. Let's just win out because I feel like this team's capable of doing that. The last couple of years we've won like six straight games to close out the season to make the playoff. We lost in 23 in Dallas to OU. We won out. Last year we lost like week 7 to Georgia. We won out in some tough spots at A&M, at Arkansas. So this team has it in their DNA to just find ways to refuse to tap out and just to keep staying in the fight. But so does Georgia. So something's got to give. But my thoughts, I guess we'll expand more on it later. We might put a show out next week too and we'll dive into the game plan more. But I do expect Georgia's defense to really, bring the heat, press a lot. They're going to watch that Vanderbilt film and be like, man, they're just hitting us side to side. We can't let them. Let's make Arch throw downfield and go through, go 10 yards downfield. So I expect us to have opportunities to, get vertical on them with Wingo, Moore, Mosley. So we got to be ready, and the O-line's got to hold up because I know Georgia's pass rush, they've only got like 8 sacks on the year, so they're not their typical thing, menacing D-line, front seven necessarily. But I know we said the same thing last year. Their defense wasn't great coming into our game, and all of a sudden it clicked against Texas. So I expect Kirby to have stuff dialed up for us, as he always does. It's a very personal thing for him, the way we steal their recruits, and we're the big new guys on the block in the SEC. He wants to have those bragging rights. So Texas has to be ready, man. This has to be like 2023 Bama. I think it can be. I think we can go in there and win it. But it's about as tough as it gets, man. Outside of Ohio State, Indiana, this is probably the toughest matchup you could draw up, and it's gonna be a war. I got my Airbnb, got my flight, need to get tickets, but I'll be there, so I'm excited.
I'm glad to have boots on the ground, Matt. That makes me a lot more confident in this game now for Texas, knowing that you and some of the Iron Boys are going to be there. But I like what you said. Number one, we got to make sure that we establish some offensive rhythm early. Georgia's defensive front has not put up those really scary numbers when it comes to getting pressures, but we've known this with Georgia is they're big, they're slow moving, but they're hard to get away from. Quinn, who wasn't very mobile last year, it was like he had 4 seconds and he had to get the ball away because even though they weren't as fast defensively, we knew Quinn wasn't going to escape the pocket. Arch with this one hopefully saw that because remember, he also was thrusted into that game in Austin, last year. And he also saw some playing time in the SEC title game with his package. What that gives me confidence is that number one, Arch knows that he needs to get the ball away fast. He needs to attack this defense early with some screen passes, short passes right to where the blitz are coming, because we do know Georgia likes to bring an extra guy. That's how they really work with their defense to add that extra pressure. They're going to rush you with your down four, but they're going to bring a fifth. And so if you can execute short passing game into where those blitzers are coming from, that will hopefully pull them off and get it to where they're now just only sending four, allowing us to have the double team, build some of those scramble alleys as well, and hopefully then finally establish a run game because they're now too focused on trying to defend the pass. Another thing that I want to talk about though on defense is that defensively, our defense has actually been trained the entire season to get ready for Georgia because now that Gunnar Stockton is a sneaky, low-key, dual threat quarterback who can hurt you both running the ball, physically downhill running the ball, as well as almost that Sam Ehlinger-esque, as well as throwing it through the air with a little bit more accuracy than Sam. It's good that we saw Mateer. It's good that we saw Lagway. It's great that we saw Mississippi State's, Kentucky's, and now most recently Diego Pavia. All five of these guys have basically been dual threat quarterbacks, but without some have had an offensive line like Oklahoma and Florida, while others have not had an offensive line like the other three. So that basically allows for us to see two to three to four different versions of a dual threat quarterback, and our defense has now been very experienced to all different types of attacks from a dual threat. So that hopefully allows us to basically Georgia's not going to throw something new that we haven't seen at us, whether it's a tricky sneak play or the new invention of the Philly special or tush push. But that allows for us to be a well-rounded defense. We will be able to contain Kirby's pretty generic playbook that he's run so far. Granted, he might have some new stuff from us, but the experience that we've seen throughout the season, I think, is really going to come into an impact with our defense here on this game, and I think it's really going to help provide pressure to Gunnar because what we've learned across all five of these quarterbacks, only two of them were above 6'2", 6'3". Everyone else was kind of around that 6'1" to 6'2" range. If we at least get in their face while they're trying to throw the ball or have that pressure and contain and collapse the pocket on them, we've seen that we've really interrupted their accuracy when it comes to passing. And if we can take away Georgia's deep ball and their intermediate passing by collapsing the pocket on him and getting that pressure, I think we turning them one-dimensional into the run game that Georgia's known for, I think is going to be a lot easier than having to still be, stopping the run while worrying about a very viable passing threat. Offensively, it's like what I've said over and over. You just got to keep building. I like what you said about making sure that we start fast. This offensive line does hold and give Arch time. But I think this is a game where Wisner and Baxter might not have the breakout or coming out game that we hope for, but I do think that Arch in his ability to run will be a little bit more impactful this year than it was maybe in the years before, especially now since it's not when Arch came in last year, it was a package. Everyone knew he was going to run. Now that he's the man on the job, he can throw and pass. I think that's going to be a big issue or a big ability for him to provide just that tiny bit of separation to get out, to find that corner, or maybe just get that first down that's only 2 yards away.
Yeah, exactly. And it was good to see Baxter getting healthy. I still don't see any explosivity to what he does, but he might just be our bruiser. But I just wonder, like, is this his ceiling, or is he still just coming back from injury? Because I remember watching James Simon, the freshman. That guy showed that burst, that ability to make someone miss in a phone booth, similar to Jonathan Brooks, Bijan. He looked like one of those, classic running backs that we've had, Jaden Blue. So I wonder if we're gonna like Baxter's leadership is invaluable. Like he needs to be a part of the team, he needs to be in the games. But I wonder if we can, spell him a little bit with Simon. Clark looked good against Kentucky when he got in. So I wonder because I feel like there's more explosivity we can get in the running game. Wisner's great. He's not the fastest guy, but he's such a slippery, hard runner, and he maximizes every run he gets. He's not going to run. He'll run through you too, and he did good in pass pro as well. So no complaints on Wisner, but I think we can get more out of that tandem. So it was good to see Baxter get in the end zone. He's a great leader, but I want to see some of the other young guys off the bench too in spurts. And this is going back to the Texas Georgia game. This is a legacy game. This is it for Sark. The narrative has always been leading up to this season, especially after we lost to Ohio State, that when Texas plays teams of similar talent level and the money's on the table, Sark doesn't win those games, which I guess is kind of true. We lost to Ohio State. You're kind of cherry picking. Lost to Georgia twice last year, but of course we won at Bama, so I don't think it's fully true. But you get that win in Red River, which is huge. A top 10 team, comparable talent more or less, and you dominate them. It's a rivalry though. Sark's been good in rivalries anyways, but still, that's a good bullet point against that narrative. But if you win this one in Athens, that whole narrative goes out the window because the two meme cliche things about Sark is we have a Georgia problem. Georgia owns us, which I guess is true over the last two games. They've beaten us twice, and that Sark can't win the big one. And this is about as big as it gets because if you win this game, I assume you'll beat Arkansas, and then you have a for sure de facto plan at home against the top five A&M, where you're in the playoff at that point. That game is a playoff game for sure. And even if you lose it, there's still an outside chance. So this opens up everything. We talked about the Vanderbilt game opening up everything. If you win in Athens, everything becomes really real. So, and I think Sark's aware of that. I think Sark's very prideful. He cares about his legacy. He's got an ego, but he also doesn't have an ego. I think he's got a good balance of being like a competitor, but also not being like Tom Herman level ego, where he takes things too personal and becomes kind of like just ridiculous. But anyways, I feel like the narrative on Sark can change a lot in next Saturday, and I'm excited to see the team that shows up and what Sark dials up.
Well, yeah, and I also want to add, you can't forget even this past week, number 9, Vandy. That was the
Yeah,
big one. The generalization was that Stark, anytime he saw a top 10 opponent, he was going to lose this game. And like I think me and you even discussed this about 2 episodes ago. When you look at that, it wasn't just him being a coach here at Texas. It was him back at USC, and you're like, okay, well, that was when he was messed up. And then even at Texas, a majority of those losses were back when in his first 2 seasons, when he was still trying to rebuild and fix what was broken that Tom Herman had left him and left us. So really, I think that's a little bit of a type of stat. Anyone who wants to say, Sarkisian's the next James Franklin, I think is extremely over exaggerating if they're a Texas fan, or just, really, it's not an opinion that I would listen to or take seriously if they're, not aligned with the University of Texas. But to kind of really cap this thing off about next week, because I know it's a bye. We shouldn't be even focused on this game. We should focus on getting healthy, like we talked about in the beginning of the episode. Until further notice, everything in the SEC runs through Georgia. I know Bama already beat them earlier this year, and you're kind of saying, oh, here's Kevin DeBoer finally being the Saban of old, or this is why Saban chose DeBoer. Alabama's back. But come on, guys. We already talked about this, that even though Alabama is one of the hottest teams in college football right now, we still have that Florida State game that can rear its ugly head at any time if they decide to become complacent, which we've seen this team has exhibited before in week 1. A team that at the time had not proven anything, and they acted entitled, gone to Florida State. And Mike Norvell struggling 3-4 Florida State beat them. So, at any point in time, that type of complacency, especially with a inexperienced team or a young team that may not have the same discipline characteristics as the Nick Saban Alabama, it can easily rear up, maybe at the most inconvenient time. They might look great through the rest of the season and probably be in the SEC title game, but then what's stopping them from potentially being, left out or losing in the first round of the playoffs? So with that being said, everything runs through Georgia. If Texas can beat Georgia this in 2 weeks, I don't see why not that Texas makes it to the SEC title game, potentially goes in there. Alabama could lose to Oklahoma because until further notice, Venables owns DeBoer because that's what happened last year. And Oklahoma is that hand grenade in the SEC. They could easily change things around. I could easily see Texas playing Ole Miss in the SEC title game, and we can win that game. And to be totally frank with you, I think and it also show our theory of Sark and Kiffin being the two prodigies of the college football world going at it. To be totally honest, Stark wins that game. We have a better defense. And offensively, I think we could still run. We can run on them. I truly think we could, and that would be the game that would truly exercise our dominance and show the world this is the number one Texas team that we expected to play Ohio State. And if that happens, there's the snowball effect, like what happened with Ohio State losing to Michigan last year. Now the sleeping beast is awoken, except it didn't take a loss late in the season. It took a resounding win in the SEC title game for us to now go and win a national championship. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, like I do always, because I get a little excited, because I can see it. We can see the path to a national championship now, especially with this Vanderbilt win.
Yeah, that's what's exciting because with the playoff era now, it's really about just getting in and getting hot, as we saw with Ohio State last year. And all the haters on here will come on here and scoff. Texas isn't going to playoff. Y'all should have lost to Kentucky and Hail State, and y'all lost to Georgia, Florida. And I hear that, but also, Texas has been in the semifinals the last 2 years. Has been a play away the last 2 years from playing in the national championship. And if we would have made it last year, we would have won it. So we were basically a play away from winning a national championship last year. And a lot of those guys, especially on defense, are still on this team. So it's not like some outlandish claim that this team has natty potential if they continue to peak and continue to improve and get hot at the right time. So I agree, Kyle. I think the tiebreakers with the SEC are kind of screwed up for us. We don't really control our destiny. We need Ole Miss to lose a game technically, or Bama. Bama doesn't have a loss in the SEC. A&M doesn't either. We get that head-to-head on A&M if we beat them. I'm not sure how it would work if it's us and Bama head-to-head, with one loss each, and Ole Miss is undefeated. Either way, I agree with what you said. We can beat pretty much anyone in the SEC, especially Ole Miss. I feel like that's a game that we would win. A&M, I'm confident. They look great, but I think we can beat them. Georgia and Bama, I'm more confident against Georgia. I think Bama, they look dangerous. They look scary. It looks like they're peaking, kind of like what we're talking about. I mean, Ty Simpson has thrown like 23 touchdowns, one interception all season. He's a great quarterback, probably the best in the country, honestly. So that concerns me. And DeBoer does kind of have Sark's number. So I'm not as confident against Bama. I hope we don't play them. I hope we get Ole Miss if we do make it. But yeah, either way, there's also the argument that we're better off going in as an at-large and not going to the SEC championship. Resting up. Ohio State won it all last year. They didn't even make it to the Big Ten title. We went to the war with Georgia, and Georgia lost their quarterback. Georgia gets railed by Notre Dame in the first round against at the first game after the bye against Notre Dame. We have to beat Clemson and go to war with Arizona State. So we're already through two wars, and it's just a lot, and you combine that with the SEC championship. So I wouldn't mind missing the game, but it would be nice to get the SEC championship banner up in DKR. But yeah, man.
You, well, we're going to buy, but at the same time, just a few minutes ago, the college football playoff standings came out, and it basically showed Texas and Oklahoma being the first two teams out. Texas and Oklahoma still have the ability to, win high profile games to push themselves up. Of course, Georgia being at 8, us beating them would probably most likely us leapfrog them, and we probably would just change positions at that point. But at the same time, winning Arkansas will probably elevate us again to, or keep us at 8, or maybe up to 7, depending on the bye situations for the other teams and how that goes out. Because as we know, bye weeks usually has a team move down just because of interest, is what I call it. Since I'm a little bit of a financial guy, but beating A&M would be huge. Number one, knocking off another undefeated team is just big in itself. That alone, I think, gets you a pretty sizable ticket punch into the college football playoffs, especially with only two losses.
For sure.
But at the same time, I want to rear this ugly head because they released the first bracket already, and they're saying Bama and maybe even Georgia are going to be getting buys in that first round. Or I think it was just A&M and Alabama. Is the bye, having that first round bye in the college football playoffs, going to rear its ugly head again
Yeah.
and be too big of a break for those teams? Because then you see Bama go down early. You're going to see A&M go down early. You'll see Indiana, the hot team, get totally quenched, and they'll go down. And then it was BYU, right? Maybe if they're undefeated,
Ohio State.
it was Ohio State. Roles could be reversed because right now it's another collision course between Oregon playing Ohio State, except this time Ohio State has the bye. You could quickly, you can also find out that some of these hot teams, that like the Notre Dames, the Alabamas, who lost super early and have been perfect ever since, that's great and all, but you almost kind of ask yourself, if you're those fan bases, do you kind of want to drop one? Do you not mind dropping one game and having your one conference loss later just to avoid this bye? Because as we saw last year, 0 for 4 is a very compelling stat. And now that this is going to be the week that we can talk about it, since it's the first time coming out. This is, I think, a good way to just kind of decompress from the Texas season. But at the same time, you're kind of looking at the strategy here, and it's going to kind of play out around the conferences and around college football that maybe maybe this is the stars aligning for Texas to get into the national championship.
Yeah, no, I think that should be the goal. We need carnage across the country. I'm looking at Notre Dame. Notre Dame comes out in the CFP ahead of us by one spot at rank 10. We're rank 11. OU's 12. Thankfully, we're ahead of OU. We beat them by 17 on a neutral field. But Notre Dame getting the third loss would be huge. Get them out. Get them out of that. Because, if we want to get in at 9-3, I mean, we're going to need the other teams to lose. And at 10-2, obviously, we're in. But I'm just thinking down the road, getting Notre Dame out would be big. Notre Dame's resume isn't good. They have the two losses. They lost to A&M at home, and they lost to Miami. And Miami's, kind of faltering, and that loss is looking worse and worse. And I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of just give up on the season. Mercenaries, like that's your theory on mercenaries, buying a whole defense. When that CFP kind of starts fading out of, like a realistic possibility, I think they might just give up. And Cristobal's teams have just been like notorious for being talented, but just losing games like in crazy ways. So I'm watching Miami and Notre Dame. The ACC only had one team. It was looking like they're only going to have one team in the field as of now. Virginia is the team right now, which kind of blows my mind that Virginia is in the CFP bracket. Texas is number 11, but we're not in the bracket. Memphis is in there too, and they're not even ranked in the top 25. So say what you want about like the G5 auto bid, but like it'll be wild to me if Texas and Arch Manning get left out for a Memphis who's like not even a ranked team. Like I feel like if that happens, the auto bid to a G5 rule will quickly disappear in the coming years. But it's just wild. So basically, Texas doesn't have much room for error, is my point when it comes to the CFP. Ohio State at 1, Indiana at 2. What are your thoughts on that? You're a Big Ten guy. I know you believe that Michigan's going to beat Ohio State, but how do you think Ohio State Do you think they are the best team in the country right now, or are you an Indiana guy, or is it A&M?
If I was to tell you this, man, Ohio State, until further notice, is the best team in the nation because of just the returning talent. Even though they still said they were riddled with a lot of guys going to the NFL and guys, go leaving early and stuff like that. It's not the case is that they've shown the maturity. They've still had these big number wins, and that shows that they have some experience, especially the secondary being just in the defense being the leaders of the defense and how they have just shut teams down no matter how good or how bad they are. Having this low point score is impressive because as we've seen with us being Texas, we've struggled putting teams away like Kentucky and Mississippi State, even though we have an ungodly, or a godly defense ourselves. So with that being said, Ohio State's number one, and since they're also the defending national championships and they haven't lost, and they beat the number one team, being us, the preseason number one, they beat a number one team this year, and now we look like the number one team this year, even though we didn't back then. They deserve that spot no matter what, and that's just how it's going to be. Um, Now, do I think Indiana could probably beat them in a head on head? Absolutely. I think also A&M could give them a run for them. Actually, no, I can't say that with a straight face. A&M would never give them a run for their money, even though they're undefeated right now. They would cave so quickly. But I want to kind of dive back to what you said right before you asked that question, which was, Memphis getting in over an Arch Manning, Texas, or a Mateer OU. If that were to happen, and the season plays out the same way, everything is, to the end from now till the day that they actually make the selection, and Memphis gets the auto bid because they're the one power, G5 school that gets in, and they get blown out because it says they're going to play Georgia at number, since they're 12, Georgia's at 5. You're going to ask yourself now, that's Boise State, who went in and got, cremated themselves, and now Memphis. That'd be 2 years in a row where that G5 school has totally, come in and been completely uncompetitive. I think you're right that G5 school rule gets taken out at that point, and it's just going to be the best teams regardless. Um, I know those like the Coastal Carolinas and the Utah states of the world are going to get mad, and the Boise states are going to get mad. But at the end of the day, Boise State, you had your chance and you failed. Memphis, you're going to get if you get your chance and you fail, then you've basically ruined it for everyone else. And you can, everyone get mad at them, not us, or not the committee or Texas in that fashion. But there are, as a Michigan guy now, I'm going to switch over to your last part of your question. There is a way for Michigan to get to the playoffs, but you're right. It's going to take a lot of chaos, and in this chaos, it actually helps Texas too. Okay? Because number 1, Texas Tech and BYU, they play. They're playing this week.
Yeah.
One of these teams is going down, and that's going to kick them out of the playoffs. Now, what I'll say is this: I want you ended it with talking about Mario Cristobal's Miami team and how they're the mercenary team. They're going to implode if their season already looks like it's over. Truly, based off what I saw with the bracket as well as the remaining schedule and how the ACC looks, it's going to take a lot of things to happen. Basically, you're going to need to see Pitt be magical and win out. That also will knock out Notre Dame, which would be crazy. And in the last game of their season, Pitt knocks off Notre Dame. Wow, what a way to get knocked out of the college football playoffs. But that's really the only way you're going to see Miami get punched up anywhere close, because then Miami plays them before Notre Dame, and if they beat Pitt and Pitt wins out and all that, it's craziness. I think Miami's totally out of the equation already. So we're going to see that implosion probably, ASAP.
Yeah.
Texas Tech, though, is the biggest mercenary team I think of college football. Like, geez Louise, like, come on. They're, me and you, my little brother and I, we've talked about this, and countless other people I've even some Texas Tech fans I met in the airport lounge will say, yeah, man, based off it now, we are one loss away from getting knocked out of getting our CFP title hopes taken away. And when that happens, this team disintegrates immediately. It is CFP or bust for them. And even for this donor, it is CFP or bust. And he's not going to put, and he would, and it could potentially set them back years. They need to have a competitive outing. They need to beat BYU. Now, if you're going to ask me, do they beat the Mormons?
Yes, they're gonna win.
I think so. I think so. And that's what I'm going to say. This is crazy. This is my hot take of the night. BYU losing to Texas Tech will drop BYU further down than if Texas Tech lost to BYU. I think that if Texas Tech lost to BYU, they go to 12. From 8, I think they only dropped 4 spots to 12 because they were, it's an 8 versus a 7. They really don't take too many. With what we've seen in the past, it doesn't kill their season. It doesn't take them all the way out. If they go to 12, Texas Tech stays alive. They will keep fighting for the rest of the season because there's still a chance for them to get into the CFP. If BYU loses to Texas Tech, though, BYU completely drops out of the safe zone. They go down to 15. They go down to 16. We have seen the committee before just really hose some of these late loss teams, even though it's to a quality opponent. They really just take these later losses so much more seriously. So that's why I will say BYU will drop completely clean out of the CFP picture if they lose at Texas Tech. But what else you need is you. Oh, I'm just going to say this, though. Ohio State and Indiana, until Thanksgiving, they're not losing a game. Indiana, in this order, has Penn State. That's a win. Wisconsin, that's a win. And Purdue, that's a win. Okay? Ohio State has Purdue. That's a win for them. UCLA, I'm going to get back to that because I think UCLA can be spicy, and we need them to get spicy because they'll do some dirty work for us, not just Texas, but also Michigan. Rutgers, they're trash, and then they get Michigan, which they're going to lose. Ohio State and Indiana, it's either is it going to be Ohio State with the first round bye, or is it going to be Indiana? I think Indiana is going to get the first round bye because Ohio State's going to lose to Michigan. We need UCLA. We need USC to take down Iowa just to help clear the road for Michigan, but also they need to pull an upset and beat Oregon. Oregon losing to USC would be huge for college football because if USC loses to Iowa but beats Oregon, they're clean out of the college football playoffs if they lose to Iowa, and that is more of a spoiler for Oregon. And just cleaning out some of these Big Ten teams, minus Michigan, is what's going to be needed just to give us more of that buffer, especially if we're going to have to be dealing with this G5 rule for Texas. And then, of course, you need Oregon to take down. You need Oregon to beat Iowa to just clean them out. And for Michigan, you need them to lose to Washington. So, because Washington does not have the tiebreaker with Michigan, that helps drop Oregon even further. And you need them to beat USC because that also, if they beat USC or lose to USC, however it is, USC gets cleaned out. And it's all around, it's a mess. The Big Ten really is a mess. And it's going to take some heroics from UCLA because UCLA plays USC and they also play Ohio State. And if somehow they win one of those two games, that's all you need to just cause the Big Ten to, fold in on itself at that point. And they're just going to say, you know what? We're going to send Ohio State, Indiana, and Michigan. We send them every year, and it's worked out pretty well for us so far. So we'll see what happens. And I think that's how you get Michigan into the playoffs, as well as making room for Texas. Again, it's a lot of moving parts. It's not most likely going to happen. I'm unfortunately going to be probably heartbroken on selection day, and I think one of my teams, whether it is Texas or Michigan, is going to get left out of the dance.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't watched much Michigan, but they come in at like 20 this week or like 19, so they're in striking distance. The schedule looks favorable the rest of the way. They just got to win at Ohio State, which or they'll be at home for that. So if recent history is accurate, they're going to win and walk in at 10-2. But I like how you have all these tiebreaker scenarios already mapped out. We need chaos. And the more chaos helps Texas. If Texas can just continue to win and just stay on schedule. That BYU Texas Tech game is interesting to me. You said that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with the fact that BYU losing, they're not going to get any benefit of the doubt because they don't have that sexiness that Texas Tech has Texas Tech went on the road and blew out Utah. They got like first rounders on their defense. Like they look like a SEC team. BYU is just the rah rah underdog Mormon team, and as soon as they suffer that first loss, they're not going to get in at large. I don't think they'd have to win the Big 12 at that point. I don't know how the tiebreakers work, but even an 11-1 BYU, I don't think it's in this year. It's too clustered, especially when you have a unranked Memphis team taking up a spot. There's only so many spots to go around. But yeah, if Texas Tech were to lose, I agree they wouldn't drop as much. The problem with that is Texas Tech already has one loss. That put them at two losses. And at that point, a two-loss Big 12 team without a Big 12 championship, I don't think they'll put them in. I think they'll have an excuse to go with more SEC teams, more Big 10 teams at that point. But then again, I don't know how the tiebreakers work out. I don't know who wins the Big 12. If Texas Tech loses, I assume BYU's going to walk into the Big 12 title and probably go undefeated, or at least go in with one loss and probably win the Big 12 championship. I think Tech would probably fall out because Utah's been on fire. I think Utah would take that. We could have a Holy War rematch in the Big 12 championship, and then the winner goes. But yeah, it's just so there's so many different scenarios. Whereas I just wonder how many SEC teams and Big Ten teams are going to get in when the dust settles. Because I know for sure there'll be three Big Ten teams automatically. Whether it's for sure Ohio State, for sure Indiana, one of Oregon, USC, Michigan for sure, and then maybe one more if things fall the right way. The thing about USC is they only have two losses too. If they beat Iowa, I think they play Iowa this week.
Mm-hmm.
They play at Iowa.
I think so. I think it's at Iowa. It's Iowa.
Oregon's at Iowa, I want to say. So I think Oregon and USC, I think one of them's going to fall out. I think it's going to be Oregon. I think Oregon's got some losses. I know their schedule's been favorable, but I'm not a believer in Oregon this year. But I think USC may fall out too. I think Michigan's in the best spot. I think Michigan really will have a chance to play themselves in Thanksgiving weekend on that Saturday morning in Ann Arbor. So that's that's how I envision it going with the Big Ten. Ohio State, Indiana, and hopefully Michigan. SEC, who knows, man? I think Bama's for sure in. They just look like a machine right now. They're the one team I fear in the SEC. Where it's like, man, they could run us out off the field. I feel like everyone else we could give a game we can beat, but I feel like against Bama we'd really have to play our best game, no doubt. Ole Miss probably in too. They only have one loss and they have kind of an easy slate the rest of the way. They'll probably worst case be 10-2 and get in. A&M looks like they're a lock. But yeah, they're in. So there's three teams right there, and then Georgia or Texas, hopefully us. That's a fourth. So I just don't see it much more than that. So the margins are narrow is my point, and all we can do is just be thankful that we control our own destiny. And if Texas does get left out at 9-3, while other 10-2 teams go, I really feel like Texas that week will go out and cancel their Ohio State game next year, cancel the Michigan series, cancel Notre Dame series, because at that point you're just basically choosing to be left out of the playoff, and you can schedule a Tulane and go 10-2 and walk into the playoff like Ole Miss would do, or whoever it would be, Notre Dame with their soft schedule. So the SEC is a grind anyway, so we don't need to have, especially with going to 9 games next year. And if you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt, you're going to see all these teams pull out. You're already seeing it happen. All these teams pull out of these big non-con games because all they do is hurt you in that case scenario. So hopefully the committee rewards teams that go out and schedule those big games, early season non-con primetime matchups, and doesn't punish them for Texas being 9-3, whereas a 10-2 team that played, like I'm saying every show I say this, a 10-2 team that plays Tulane and whoever else. So that's something to watch. But you just beat Georgia and then beat Arkansas and then beat A&M, and it's no problem. So I'd rather just do that and just walk in, maybe get a home game in round 1. That'd be awesome.
With Texas and how the standings came out being at 11, just to close this thing out before I kind of say a couple other things and go off the rails. Texas, and I'll say this is a hot take as well. If Texas loses to Georgia, I'd say the CFP hopes are out the window at that point, because even if Texas beats A&M, I think just because of the loss to Georgia and how we've fallen unfortunately into that real
Yeah.
skew that the CFP committee does with late wins, with late season losses. I think that just kills us, and that would be the only reason I see us 9-3 not making it for sure. Like the selection comes out the next day after we beat A&M, but we lost to Georgia. I'll come out and they'll say 9-3 Texas is going to a bowl game. No, doesn't go to the CFP. I'm kind of saying, you know what? I'm okay with that. I understand that. That sucks. That's tough. But if Texas beats Georgia and we lose to A&M, that 9-3 Texas team, now I'm not going to say. Now I'm going to turn around if after College Station we lose and go 9-3. The next day the CFP comes out. I'll be like you, a 10-2 team that has the Tulane and has that stuff, and they get in. I will then be angry with that. I think Texas losing to A&M but beating Georgia still is a 9-3 Texas team that should make the CFP. I think a 9-3 Texas team that loses to Georgia but beats A&M does not, which is a real crazy thing to say about that. But that is how the SEC is going to play out, because all you're doing right now is you're replacing. We can already kind of guarantee lock A&M's going to get in, even if they lose to Texas. One loss, it's one loss SEC team. They're in. Okay. Alabama, one loss SEC team. They win out and they play out, which is very likely for them to do unless, Oklahoma has anything to say about that. Alabama's in. Ole Miss has a very easy schedule. They're going to only have one loss. If I'll say this, if Ole Miss loses a second game, that's a 10-2 SEC team that is potentially on the cusp, because I think Texas can jump them at that point.
Yeah.
And that might be the reason. If some other chaos happens, I think we drop. You could potentially see Ole Miss getting dropped, but a fourth Big Ten team coming in and taking that spot. I think that's where that happens. I think that Lane Kiffin does not have any room for error, even with his one loss.
Yeah.
Just because of, again, the late game loss bias that the committees, no matter how much they change, has always brought into effect. That late game loss, that late season loss is just a killer for some of these 1 or 2 loss teams. It just is. And Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss is one of them. Michigan, though, has truly for being that number 4 team, you're asking for Oregon to lose some games that they're not supposed to. And I'll say this: the Big Ten is number 1, Indiana; number 2, Ohio State; number 3, Oregon. That's my top 3. Even though right now in the Big Ten standings, it's Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan. It's only because Oregon hasn't played enough Big Ten games as Michigan. If we're looking at talent and winning, I will say Oregon is above my Michigan Wolverines. But that also should mean that they're 4. Iowa and USC will take care of themselves via these next 2 games. And if Michigan goes in there and spoils and beats number 1 Ohio State, that alone, I think, gets you into a CFP. I think it gets you in. Because they're like, hey, this team doesn't matter they lost to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, ain't that bad of a team. Especially if Oklahoma turns around and somehow beats Alabama magically and just causes some chaos itself. That looks great. If USC can just do some things and look decent but lose to only Oregon, that's great too. It makes the 2 losses that Michigan suffered not that bad. But it's going to take some Herculean effort. It's going to take winning some games. And I think that's really... You nailed it on the head. This year, I think this is the year. I think you're right, Matt. This is the year that after this, we're going to start having some really, really boring preseason games going forward. I don't see Texas canceling series. I just don't see that happening, because I feel like Texas is a program of its word. They're still going to play these things, but I just don't think any more future big conference or big time preseason games are going to get scheduled. I think you're right. It's going to be a lot of us calling up University of North Texas, calling up Rice again, calling maybe I think this would be a good idea. Calling up UNT, and let's call up SMU. They're decent teams in their respective conferences, but but if you put them in the SEC, they'd get dog walked. So let's put them on. They would be respectable mid-quality teams that we beat, and they are the ones, as we've seen now with NIL. They have been some of those schools, like they have been some of those outlier schools of the G5 that are competing for spots. So it'd be a quality win for us at the end. You could argue it is a quality win for us beating them in preseason. So let's renew the Southwest Conference and bring SMU back to be a yearly non-con game. And let's really, since we're in the SEC, totally reevaluate our schedule build out and start really, because of what we've seen now, and if this is the way college football committee wants to make the playoff selection, then let's go full Alabama, let's go full Georgia, let's go full Ole Miss, and let's take, instead of having three, scrimmages in the beginning of the season after game one, let's spread them out throughout the rest of the year. And let's fully embrace the SEC title and start putting some of these marshmallows throughout our schedule. I think that's the best way to do it instead of canceling series as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. Get teams like that in there. It's just so many factors coming into play, and really 9-3 just doesn't look good. 10-2 looks a lot better, and it's every week is tough in the SEC, especially like I'm saying with the 9 game schedule. It's going to get even worse next year. So yeah, I like that idea. Put in UNT, put in Rice. Load up on the old Southwest Conference teams. Houston. No, I wouldn't say Texas Tech or Baylor or TCU because they're a little too dangerous, especially
Plus, we
Texas
can
Tech.
always plus with them we can just say some BS about the Big 12 not liking playing out of conference games late and all that stuff, like the old Big 12 rules. We use that, but like let's bring back potentially winning a state title like Florida has it. Every Florida team plays each other, give or take one or two, just because. Let's make a Texas state title for college. I think that's be the greatest thing around. Even potentially make a little trophy that could be sent around to all the universities and stuff. It would probably be mostly sitting in A&M or Texas, where that trophy's going to sit most of the time. It'll never go to Lubbock. It'll never go to UNT, and it'll never go to SMU.
UNT. I mean, yeah, that's true.
The day UNT does something like that is the day the world burns down. Okay, but they're, no matter what, they're a great, consistent, um, preseason game that we can win. But now they're competitive, so it looks like it'd be a competitive win. They have winning schedule. UNT has a winning schedule now. They only had one loss up until about a week ago, and I'm pretty sure they only still have one loss. That's pretty good. SMU's in the ACC, and even though they got 2 losses to inconvenient to like Wake Forest and stuff, SMU is still a contender. They're in the ACC. They're pretty good. They were in the playoffs, and the first year of the expanded playoffs, and so I think they're they're a good one to put in as well. And it's both those teams, it's not very hard to travel. We probably don't have to pay them any money to come play us. They'd be more than willing to try and come play spoiler, and we could probably agree to get them to Austin for sure. We can get UNT down to Austin, but I think we could either get SMU down to Austin, or even Texas going up to Ford Field would be great, because we take over Ford Field. It'd be a home game for
It's
us.
too small of a stadium, man. That's a high school stadium. But
But hey, craziest atmosphere I've ever been in. I went last year to the SMU Boston College game. It was me and a couple of our Iron boys. We just got banged up and had a great time over there until we realized, Bill O'Brien was the coach of Boston College, and then all of a sudden it was like, why are we stressing over this game? It's because we hate Bill O'Brien. But still, SMU is a pretty nice stadium, surprisingly, and it wouldn't be hard for us to turn that into a home crowd environment because of the amount of Texas fans in Dallas. So, we came to the SEC for a reason. Let's do away with the Big 12 scheduling rules and having all our non-con, shuffle to the front. Let's fully embrace the bad boy of the SEC, and let's really just spread them out. Give us multiple buys throughout the season, and really, at the same time, just buff our record with, being undefeated with some of these cream puffs at this point. If that's what the CFP is going to be, based off now. It's no longer the eye test; it's just the stats at this point. Because then why is A&M so high? That's all I can say about it.
yeah, yeah, a lot of stuff goes into it, man. It's crazy, but We control our own destiny. I keep saying it. Sound like a broken record. So that's all you can ask for with 3 games left. But yeah, man, we're complaining about the rankings now, but it's gonna be different next week. It's gonna be way different on Selection Sunday. So it'll all work itself out. But there's usually always someone that gets left out, and so we'll see. Hopefully it's not us. Hopefully we get in there this year. 3 years in a row. That's what we're going for. But man, we're off this week. Bobby comes at a great time, but there are some good games around the country. Missouri A&M's a good one. LSU, Bama, some good SEC games. Um, I like that Iowa Oregon game. So the landscape of the CFP is going to change a little bit this weekend. And there could be some major upsets too. I expect Notre Dame to be challenged against Navy. I know they're at home, but Navy's a good football team, so I think that could be interesting. Someone could lose that we're not expecting. So a lot to keep our eyes on. But it's nice that we don't have to worry about a game this weekend because, man, we've been living and dying. I've had like 3 different heart attacks over the past couple of weeks. Just watching us against Hail State, being in Lexington when we just like completely pooped the bed and somehow won that game despite playing like high school level football. And then, of course, last week we looked great against Vanderbilt, but we had to do something where I had like another heart attack. It just had to happen with that fourth quarter collapse in the last 4 minutes. But yeah, so we'll see, man. I'm excited. Hope is restored in this team. Sark's got some stuff cooking now. Let's see if they can get improve fast enough, stay healthy enough to make a run at the national championship, like you were saying. Because I believe that we have the roster and the staff to do that. That was the whole goal coming into the year, and it's still on the table. So let's go out and do it.
Yeah, man, I need one of us to get to the CFP, man, because I don't know if you saw the recent bowl predictions, but if both Michigan and Texas don't make it and go 9-3, I'm gonna have to go be a house divided again for the second year in a row at the Citrus Bowl, and I don't know about you, but I'd like for Michigan to be in the playoffs and maybe Texas go to the Citrus Bowl because wearing Texas gear in Florida is a whole heck of a lot easier and more comfortable for a bigger guy like me than being wearing northeastern heavy snow winter gear down in Florida with Michigan stuff. So I had to do that last year in the ReliaQuest Bowl wearing these thick cotton shirts of Michigan down there, and I was sweating up a storm. So I'd love to have my little button-down Texas Hawaiian shirt in Florida, if anything. But at the end of the day, what we need to see to make sure to ensure that that type of thing happens is we need to actually see just more chaos in the Big 12. So you're going to see me plopped on the couch for the BYU Texas Tech game. That's going to be my main
Yeah.
focus for the weekend. I'll probably watch Indiana and Penn State just because I got to see in case if Penn State, causes some chaos over there. I don't think they will, but it's they kind of gave Ohio State a heart attack and then they got pushed away in the fourth. Maybe Signetti loses focus and Penn State jumps on them early and stays on top. Who knows? But we need some more. We need Texas Tech to either. I think we need Texas Tech to go down and just get not clear out to just open up that path for us. That helps us out and even with the beating of Georgia and A&M. So I just think we just need Texas Tech to totally drop out, unfortunately. And number two, I like that too because I hate Texas Tech. As I've said on at least 3 of these past 4 episodes.
Oh yeah. I don't think anyone likes them. I mean, I respect them. They're cool, I guess, but God, they got some vicious fans, man. That
They
yeah.
got rid of the tortillas. That was the cardinal sin with me. When they got rid of throwing free food, I was like, nah, this ain't the Texas Tech of old anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Now they're
There's nothing cute about them anymore.
I know now they're buying all these 5 stars and stuff. Now it's like, oh crap, they're kind of a threat now. So like I like them even less now. So
It's like quit trying to be us. Like you have one booster who's buying all the stuff for you. We
yeah,
at least we at least have a team or a classroom full.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, man. Well, we'll try to get back on here next week and maybe get some more talk more about the rankings next week and the matchups. We'll talk more about Texas, Georgia, and whatever else goes on around the country. But a lot's going to change from now to next Saturday against Georgia. So we'll be on here and be sure to cover it. But Yeah, y'all. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. If it's the end. We've been kind of consistent now, putting it out every week the last couple of weeks. So we're trying to, get our algorithm back up. We fell off a cliff. We just, we stopped posting, but we're bringing it back. Kyle's making it great again, and Texas Platinum, baby, stock is on the rise. So give us a like and a subscription. But Kyle, you got anything else?
No, man, hook 'em horns. Texas fans, enjoy this week. Drink a little so you don't have to, be stressed. This is a week. This is our week to relax. Watch other games. Have fun. Go to a random game if you want to. This is the week to go to a random college football game. Maybe even go to like the local Division II team if you got one. I'm probably going to go try and go to the SMU game this week or something, or I might even go to TCU's game just to go watch football and enjoy being there and watching football. Do that. Get yourself recharged because this back half is going to be a trudge. And when we make the playoffs, because I'm going to speak into existence, when we make it to the playoffs, that's just going to be tough every day, every single game. So, let's enjoy this week now. Like our boys who are going to be playing on the field, let's relax, let's get our bodies right, catch up on some work, and be ready for next week when we go take on Georgia.
Let's do it, man. And yeah, when we make the playoffs, we're going to be that 11 seed that no one wants to see. So speak it into existence. But all right, y'all. All right, y'all. Thank y'all for watching. Welcome.
Welcome.